Good morning, boys and girls. Welcome back to Uncle Pete's Wall Street. So, I wanted to continue with the topic of my first video. We were talking about inflation and how you need to do something to stay ahead of it. Otherwise, you're going to end up in trouble in your later years. So, I have on the screen here two graphs. On the right side here is the decline of the US dollar. From 1900, this graph goes to 2000. So we're another 25 years in. So this is what this depicts here is the loss of the dollar's purchasing power in the 20th century. And this continues today. And as we all know, inflation has picked up considerably in the last bunch of years because we had the government shutting people down uh, because of COVID, and the government also printed a ton of money. Now, you're always going to hear politicians talking about the causes of inflation, and a lot of them don't talk about how it's the government that actually causes inflation. It's not us, it's not businesses. A business raising their prices is not inflation. Inflation is caused by the government printing too much money. Period. End of story. I don't care what these politicians or people you see on the news want to talk about people's greed for buying things and the consumer culture that we have and all of that. None of that causes inflation. The people do not cause inflation. Inflation is caused by government. And what I have here are these two contrasting graphs. On the right side is how the government has destroyed our money. And on the left side, we have a graph of how business has done for our money. Both these graphs, as you can see, are going in the opposite direction through time. So this is the S&P 500 index. This is a graph of the S&P 500 index from 1982 to the present. What the S&P 500 index is keeps track of 500 excuse me 500 large corporations, right? And it comes up with a figure here. And you could see over the years how the S&P 500 has gone up in value, right? Because the worth, the value, the market value of the companies contained within the S&P 500 index, the 500 companies, their value, their worth has increased over the years. And at the same time, you see what the government has done to your money. So when I discuss, and I asked a question in the last video, what are you doing to stay ahead of inflation? This is why. This is what the government does to your money over here. And this is what private enterprise, what businesses do for your money. Completely opposite ends of the spectrum. One grows your money, one destroys it. So, and keep in mind, contained in this graph of the S&P 500, we have the dot-com bubble bursting in 2000. Now, a lot of you younger people don't remember that, but when the internet was very young, in the mid to late 90s, there was a fever in the investing world for internet companies. And there were just, it seemed like every week there were dozens of internet companies going public. What going public means is The companies want money to expand their businesses, or in the case of what was happening in the late 90s, they were taking advantage of the fervor and the fever of internet companies. So they were issuing stock to the public. And what was happening is you had companies that had nothing but a website. They didn't have employees. They didn't have a factory. They didn't have really a product. They didn't have a history of earnings or dividends or nothing. They just had a website. They're going public, and the investing public was buying up their shares in a mad rush to get rich in the short term. And in March of 2000, that all collapsed. And I remember Warren Buffett, I want to say it was Warren Buffett who said this. He said, before this whole crash of March 2000 of internet companies, he said, if I was teaching at a business school today, I would give an assignment, and the assignment would be analyze an internet company. And he said, anyone who turned in a paper, he would fail the course. And of course, the reason is because you can't analyze an internet company at that time because they had no history. Everything was brand new. You had companies, internet companies that had nothing but a website going public at $20 a share. And before the end of first day of trading, they were up 200, 300, 400, 500%. It was insane. And so that's represented in this S&P 500 index. Right here, you see the rise in the late 90s of companies, and then they fall off a cliff when the dot-com bubble burst. Then in here you have the terrorist attacks in 2001. You have the housing subprime mortgage debacle in here too. The accounting scandals. You have, and the list goes on and on and on of seemingly devastating events that would cause people to lose faith in private enterprise, and yet the market bounces back. And believe me, there were millions of people who all these events just sold and sold and sold, took their losses, where the people who were smart didn't sell. If they had cash on the side when the market went haywire and traded down and had huge corrections, they bought more shares. So really what I wanted to demonstrate by these two graphs is just to show you and to give you a picture of why I did the first video on inflation, where I asked you young people two questions. Are you planning on living a long life? Obviously, the answer to that is yes. And the other question, the next question would be, well, what are you doing to stay ahead of inflation? Because if you look at this graph on the right, this is what the government does to your money. And if you're not here on this left side of the graph, if you're not putting your money in some kind of a vehicle to stay ahead of the destruction that government is doing to your money, what do you think your lifestyle is going to be like in your 60s, your 70s, and your 80s? And you young people, you're going to be living into your hundreds. I mean, my father was born in 1935, and he's going to be 90 years old in another 2 weeks. He was born in 1935. Imagine you young people who were born somewhere in the 2000s, how, at what age you're going to live to. You're going to be living into your hundreds. And if you don't get a grasp of your money, if you don't put a plan together to stay ahead of the destructive power of government against your money, you're going to be in trouble. Okay? So stay tuned to this channel, subscribe, hit the notification bell. I have a lot more videos coming. I hope I laid the foundation now that we are all subject to inflation, and we all have to do something to keep ahead of it so that we don't end up in dire straits where we're in our 60s, 70s, and 80s. All right? So I'll see you in the next video.